Good morning from Medellin, Colombia. It is Wednesday, June 24th. This week on the podcast, artist and developer Sarah Friend joins me to discuss Consensys, circles, and so much more. And as always, be sure to subscribe and share this episode with somebody that you think would like to learn more about blockchain. Enjoy. All right, Sarah, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. Thank you for taking the time to come on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So before we kind of jump in and start learning more about what you do in depth, can you tell us a little bit about your background and kind of how you got into the world of blockchain for our audience?
Yeah, for sure. I'm a software developer. I have been working in the blockchain industry since 2016. Pretty interested in blockchains in general, since maybe 2013. And I guess I started off kind of contributing in an open source way on my own. I was at a place in New York called Recurse Center, and that was kind of like my first projects in the space. But shortly I got a job at Consensys. So I've done mostly Ethereum development, though I know a bit about other blockchains too. I was with Consensys for 2 years. And when I left, since then, I've been working in sort of a freelance capacity, mostly on a project called Circles UBI, which is, I mean, maybe we'll get into it in more detail, but it's a kind of like an alternative community currency. Sometimes we call it a peer-to-peer universal basic income. And I'm also working right now on a project called Culture Stake or Future Fairness, which is a quadratic voting app for curating festivals.
Very cool. So where are you from, or where are you located?
I'm from Canada originally. So I lived in Toronto for a long time. And now I live in Berlin, Germany.
Very nice. It's a pretty big jump. What made you want to move from Canada to Germany?
That's a that's not a crypto answer, you know.
No, gotcha.
It's there's a lot of reasons. Some, you know, more personal, others a little more mechanical.
Was
Canada is
it mostly like personal stuff, or did you like see some opportunity in Germany that you wanted to take advantage of?
I mean both. Like it's a really big life choice. So it's not the kind of thing you do for like one reason. So there were a number of things that sort of all conspired to make it seem like the best choice. There was definitely a professional element. Circles, a project I've been working on pretty regularly, is based here. So most of the team is here most of the time. So that was definitely a factor. There are a number of things I'm interested in. I'm interested in art, I'm interested in technology, I'm sort of interested in the political ramifications of both of those things. If you imagine them all as sort of a Venn diagram, I like to be kind of in the middle of that space. And there's a lot of things also in that overlap here in Berlin. It's really rich environment, if those are, you know, the domains you work in.
Gotcha. So do you see like a lot of interest in crypto from the people or even the government while you're there in Germany? Or is it something that's just within like the developer community, or like what do you see because you're kind of there on the ground?
Yeah. Well, there, you know, these things kind of all work together and it's multifactorial. There are a lot of crypto companies, specifically in Berlin. It's still, though, you know, it's increased a lot in price since the wall fell. It's still a very affordable city. So it's an appealing environment for startups. And actually, Germany is, in at least one way that I learned kind of recently, it's not part of why I moved here, but it's true and interesting. They have a really favorable tax situation for cryptocurrencies. Maybe you've come across this from other folks. If an asset has been held for more than a year, it's exempt from capital gains. tax.
Mm-hmm.
So I have been speculating privately if that might have something to do with the amount of crypto companies based here, because there are a lot. But
Yeah,
I'm
that's
not
true.
sure.
Yeah, that's true. I know in the US it's kind of all over the place and it's a mess, and a lot of people aren't sure on, what their tax liability is going to be when they're holding crypto, because depending on what agency um, you talk to, one says it's a currency, one says it's an asset. um, it gets a little bit messy,
Definitely.
but
It can
I can
depend on what you
see,
were using it for.
right, I can see why that would be attractive to people to want to move your startup to Germany.
Yeah, I think this might be part of it. We're also very close to, like, geographically to Switzerland, and I know there's also
Hmm.
a lot of crypto stuff based there, as well. So Germany also,
Hmm.
speaks German,
Right.
and is just a short train ride away, um,
I
as
think
well.
I think in Switzerland, crypto is considered currency.
I don't know. I just know that it's the legal base for a ton of companies in the industry. So there must be
Hmm.
something very favorable about it. But
Yeah,
it's
I'll
not
have
really
to.
my wheelhouse.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'll have to double check on that. I know there's a lot of companies in Switzerland too, and they do a lot of meetups there. And I think it's because crypto is considered a currency under Swiss law. Not really surprised. They've always kind of been notorious for stuff like that, regarding
Mm.
money. No, that's really interesting. And you mentioned that you spent some time working with Consensys, right?
Yeah, I was at Consensus for 2 years. And actually, fun fact, as we talk about uh uh things we don't know about the fine details of paying your tax in various jurisdictions. I worked on for a long time their tax product.
Oh, cool.
Um, yeah, it was called Balance, and I'm not sure it's operational anymore, but it was mostly accounting, for your crypto assets.
What was balance? Was it just so okay? So it was just accounting for your crypto assets, like trying to help keep track of like buys and sells and stuff like that.
And reporting. So say you are a company that is interacting in crypto all the time, maybe like a crypto native bookkeeping platform, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So we created sort of the profit loss sheet that you might want for your company, but as though your company was crypto native. We were a little too early, actually. I don't think there were that many companies who were operating enough in crypto that they could use Balance primarily.
Hmm.
When I left that team, we were in the process of um, of digesting that realization, and changing what we did to think of what we were creating more as like a subledger to be integrated into some other accounting software or solution that a company might already be using.
Right.
But I left the team before that was completed.
Yeah, there's an issue when it comes to accounting in the crypto space. I personally have also had a lot of trouble trying to account for crypto transactions, because on paper it's hard to discern between what kind of transaction is, just a transfer versus um, an actual payment to somebody or a buy and sell. Um, Sometimes when you use software and it picks up on a movement between one exchange and another, it doesn't know what to classify that as unless you tell it. And if you do a lot of transactions, then it can kind of messy and it kind of mess up your gains or losses or whatever you're filing under, at least in the US. So I know there's a
No,
lot of
I've sorry.
no, it's okay. I was just gonna say I know there's a lot of work that definitely needs to be done there to kind of help label that stuff. It's almost like you need to start labeling your addresses and like what they're for. Um, because if you have an account for one business and then a personal account and then you have a family account and then you have one that you pay people out of or do payroll through, or one that you do for trading, it all gets really really messy when you're moving crypto because it's so fast. Like it's a lot easier to move crypto around than it is to move a stock around or move dollars around. So
Oh, definitely. I completely relate to the work of compiling all of this, going through it. It's so much easier now. than it was in 2017, but it still has a long way to go to reach the sort of ease of, oh yes, I know how to do this accounting and report on this the way I should, that we have for other types of financial instruments. Yeah, it's, and it's even dealing with like different the constraints of different blockchains natively, right?
Right.
Like on an Ethereum like chain, it's a very common practice to reuse the same address for a number of things, and this can make it a lot easier to get your transaction history. They're at least all tied to in or out of one or several addresses, but other chains, like Bitcoin like blockchains, it's a best practice to never reuse the same address, and wallets just switch it, without necessarily even making it too transparent to the user that that's happening. So, if you still have the wallet, you can load. It's really obvious, but not everyone does. Scraping that kind of information off the blockchain itself is really difficult.
Yeah,
So.
it's tricky because there's like, you want to have good practice, for security and privacy reasons, but at the same time, you have to find a way to label things correctly for reporting requirements for your government. At least in the US, it'd be for the IRS. So
Mhm.
it's like, yeah, don't want to reuse addresses. You want to use different ones as often as possible and obscure,
I
but
mean, yeah,
no, go ahead.
sorry, I was going to say they are warring impulses, like the the anon-friendly crypto life and the like public reporting, tax-paying life.
Hmm.
Um, they're difficult practices to reconcile.
Yeah. The software is definitely getting a lot better, but there's definitely some issues with labeling those addresses and knowing like what's being done for what, especially if you're, moving crypto around in small amounts or in volume. Um,
Hmm.
we're getting there slowly. You mentioned that you're doing a lot of work for circles and future fairness. Can you talk a little bit about what those two things are and like kind of what work you're doing for them?
I mean, I do the same work on both projects.
Hmm.
I'm a software developer, and at this point, most like I tend to work pretty close to the blockchain in terms of the stack. So the smart contracts, and we use sort of relayer services for both projects. That's the main bulk of what I do.
Hmm.
Um, and actually, like a fun fact maybe is back when I worked at Consensys on balance, the first thing I wrote was this indexer, to sort of scrape all the transactions that had ever happened on the Ethereum blockchain, um, and parse out all of the token movements,
Hmm.
and then put them in sort of like a normal database so that we could query them by address. Because there was just no APIs to do that whatsoever. Like Etherscan didn't support it yet. Tokens themselves were very new. And now there's like nice infrastructure for taking care of these problems of like querying the movements of tokens or the internal contents of smart contracts. So I mean, I also run those tools,
Hmm.
um, and appreciate how much easier they are to use than sort of the roll your own version that everyone was doing in 2017.
Gotcha.
Um, and that's pretty like a technical thing, perhaps, about what I do, but
Hmm.
the projects have sort of content as well. Circles is an alternative currency, sort of. It calls itself a universal basic income, but I guess sometimes I think that is a term that distracts from what we're doing or confuses what we're doing, as much as it explains it, because universal basic income is attached to the sort of narrative about states redistributing wealth. Um, but in circles where we're our own currency, there's no sort of direct redistribution of wealth going on. Instead, it is an identity layer that is very lean. but it's a web of trust. And participants in the system all get their own tokens that are minted to them as a function of time. So you just have this sort of increasing balance. And this increasing balance that you have all the time, it's inflationary, is kind of universal basic income like, in that, you know, you are getting this community currency all the time. But you know, it's not what people picture. Like, it's not really the state redistribution version. But that is loosely what Circles is doing.
Circles is still in beta, correct?
Yeah, we are in beta. People can sign up to the beta. It's now open. The onboarding process is slow. We're working on streamlining it right now, seeing if we can make it a little more user-friendly. So right now, if you make an account, which you can just do, in order to really unlock what's possible in the app, you need to have 3 trust connections from people who are already in the app, sort of like 3 invites sent by our current users. So, you know, if you want one, send me your address.
Yeah, I would love
but
to check
don't
it out.
everyone who's listening to this send me their address.
No, it sounds pretty cool. When do you think that they maybe will get out of beta?
Yeah, our target right now is September of this year. So if all goes according to plan, not that long. We're sort of doing hardening of what we've built, bug fixes, and sort of incorporating the UX feedback that we got during this test period. We're running on a testnet right now. So sort of the genesis block of the Circles system will be the part of that launch out of beta into the real thing.
Sweet. That sounds pretty cool. Is future fairness part of that, or is that something separate from Circles, completely different?
No, it's another project separate. The freelance life, you know. Are we ever only doing one thing?
Yep.
I was talking about this just this morning, and you know, it's got so many benefits in terms of, you know, the freedom of lifestyle that you might have, but there's also so much precarity, and then like constantly code switching into the new project. Anyway, Future Fairness is a project with a gallery in London, UK, called Furtherfield. And Furtherfield is a really cool space. They've been around sort of the digital arts community since the 90s, like the birth of the internet. They were also, you know, in terms of the art institutions, one of the first to start looking at blockchains, really in general at all. And they've continued to engage in a really thoughtful way, I think. Future Fairness is a project to let people in a particular place vote using quadratic voting on what they liked about sort of festivals, what types of artworks they would like to see commissioned in their location. It's sort of like a local first voting on cultural content. Furtherfield is really interested in how art institutions might democratize, but also to do so in a way that like preserves the legacy of their expertise, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So is that similar to like Provenance in that way, where it's preserving, you know, that artist's work and legacy?
Maybe, but not quite. I guess, okay,
How would it differ?
So Furtherfield, or like imagine a bunch of artists who've invested their lives in being artists. They kind of have expertise about what will work well in an artwork. You know, if we were commissioning a future artwork, the people who've all done this 20 times before know a lot about it, and about what will work and what will be impactful and how to execute it well, etc. But also we sort of have this problem where people who are not from the art world want to see things that they can relate to, that make sense in their own communities. And we want to find ways to bridge those sort of like different interest groups and different types of expertise. So fun fact about me, I actually studied painting. I have a painting degree and I'm a self-taught software developer.
Oh, nice.
I know, it's so weird.
Not too weird.
I know there's a lot of self-taught software developers out there, but painting is kind of a random place to have come from.
Yeah, a little bit, but I mean, it's still in the world we live in today. I mean, anyone can pretty much learn to code if they really want to. There's so many resources out there outside of the traditional educational system. So I've seen people come from science backgrounds, art backgrounds, um, philosophical backgrounds, all kinds of different areas, and have jumped into coding and have become pretty good coders, developers, and whatnot. So not too surprised.
Yeah, it's kind of one of the beautiful things about the software industry is that you kind of can, more than many industries, just hop into it without a credential.
True.
This isn't perfect, but I mean, you cannot practice law without passing the bar, for example, but you can write software. There are still like sort of gates and obstacles, but it's more open than many.
Yeah, well, it's kind of an art of its own in a way, isn't it? Because you're building and creating things with code.
Oh, definitely. I completely agree. I think that like studio art practice and software development have maybe more in common as disciplines than like literary criticism and software development. Both artists and engineers like make stuff, and there's sort of like a physical craftsmanship. Not physical in the case of software directly, but I do think they're related. I talk to people about it a lot. It's cool that it's come up for you too.
Oh yeah, definitely. I see it all the time, and especially when you're around so many people that are freelancers or digital nomads. We were talking about it just a little bit ago, but it's really easy to be a freelancer or a digital nomad or whatever you want to call yourself, because you can travel, live with it wherever you kind of want, work wherever you want when you have that kind of a skill set. Because being a developer of any kind, really knowing how to code is very useful practically everywhere around the world. And it's something you can do from your computer, your laptop mostly. So I definitely see a lot of people from different backgrounds that are developers in that space. A lot of interesting stories.
Is in painting school, this super weird place that I came from. It's maybe like there's like a joke. I think it was actually literally a website where they polled people in countries about what the best painting was and what the best painting is. If you just like ask everyone, is a very bland, generic like landscape painting for most countries. I should dig up this website again because it was quite funny. And so you sort of, if you don't take into account the expertise of people who've spent forever sort of building art galleries and art careers, and you purely let anyone who lives in a city vote on the art that they like, you kind of can die by, what's the word in design? Design by democracy. Like if you put everything that everyone wants in the app, it's not going to be a good app. If you build the art that pleases everyone most equally, it's going to be quite bland and maybe not interesting art. So it's like, how do we find ways to incorporate feedback that doesn't fall into this pit hole of like making the art worse? So we want to please and speak to a population's like goals for what kind of cultural things they might see and experience, but in ways that are also informed by art legacies. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense.
It's like incorporating different kinds of stakeholders.
Right. it's definitely a space that's, I've been around a lot. I do have a hard time following it sometimes, but there's so much cool work being done in that space. And even more broadly speaking, it's really cool to see, in a space that's so techy and geeky as blockchain, having artists, kind of part of that and being able to, make it more interesting and kind of drive people towards it in some very creative and interesting ways, whether it be like we were talking about before we started recording, the quote unquote stereotypical crypto artist that develops something with like an NFT, or similar to maybe what you do and you have a different artistic view on blockchain and being able to, develop something that's usable, or create something with code, in an artistic way, I guess. um, I think there's a lot of cool things that are definitely being done in the space, in the realm of art.
I agree, definitely. I think that artists are present in a lot of different sort of emerging technical fields.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that art art practices can bring a lot actually to those fields, in a practical way as well. Artists are really good at thinking critically about what technology is doing, sort of showing technology itself, if that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense. Like,
Mm-hmm. They make it very visual for people to kind of understand, and it's a really good way to bring awareness to the space too. I think a lot of credit has to go out to some of these quote unquote crypto artists. A lot of them are my friends too. They bring a lot of interest into blockchain and crypto and what it is and what it stands for in some ways and the symbolism behind some of it. Um, I think that's really helpful for people that are trying to get educated, trying to understand it. It's interesting because you don't see that in as largely in other technologies as you do in blockchain, at least right now. It's not like there's a huge, massive robotic arts community that's super popular right now, or VR art community that's super popular right now. It's that all the cool kids are jumping into blockchain art simply because of, being able to, sell it and do all these cool things. And there's such a big market for it, but it brings a lot of awareness, which is really good. And it's really cool to see that. And I think it helps educate people on like why this stuff exists, and even some of the smaller details that we gloss over in the technical stuff. I've seen some crypto artists that are my friends really kind of dive into some of that stuff too and make it more explainable. So I think it's really healthy in a lot of ways.
definitely. I think that, well, specifically also the type of crypto art that you're talking about, and
Mm-hmm.
I guess what people think about generally when they hear about art and blockchain overlaps, because I think I'm sort of like a weirdo in that world.
Right.
It is really approachable. It makes sense to people who otherwise maybe wouldn't be interested in blockchain. The sort of solvable problem of how to better sell things online, artworks, is one that's kind of like easy to bite off and maybe explain to someone who just got into the just heard about blockchains.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think and would sort of bite back a little bit that there are communities of artists doing really interesting work with other types of technology too. I don't think it's just blockchain. There's a ton of people. I mean, I've made work with machine learning.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are tons of people also doing robotics projects and VR projects. I think that actually sort of that there's this kind of weird bigger problem almost.
Mm-hmm.
What do we mean when we say art? Like someone in a makerspace sort of creating like movable sculptures with LEDs and servo motors, to have at their some local music festival is totally art, but it's not crypto art. It's like a different thing. And so like they're both making art, but they're making so this word of art is kind of failing us because it's not describing both types of practices very well. But I think it's all out there, and if we take like a broad view, we can sort. There's actually a lot of like really interesting sub communities that can be discovered.
Yeah.
Definitely a lot of them have trouble making money though. So that problem is
Yeah. That
perennially around.
that maybe adds to it a little bit. I mean, I know there's a lot of different artists out there in different tech spaces for sure. A lot of different subgroups. So not discrediting any of them. I know they're all out there, but I mean, crypto art, or at least the term crypto art, is just really hot right now. So you see so many people under that term trying to do something in that space. It's popping up in my Twitter feed all the time. If it wasn't that popular, we wouldn't be critiquing it a bit right now. So it's an interesting space. Art is definitely very broad itself. You can you can make art in all kinds of different ways. So I mean, we could probably talk about that forever. But I know you mentioned that you consider yourself an artist as well, not necessarily a crypto artist, quote unquote, but an artist within that space. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I would be happy to. Yeah, so I'm an artist too, but I guess the reason I feel like the term crypto artist isn't the best description of what I do is that most people who are crypto artists are sort of interested in finding ways to sell their artworks that are new, or to establish marketplaces for artworks in places that there sort of weren't before. And sometimes their artwork is, well, often they're sort of like 2D images, but they could be anything, and they sort of end up tokenized in some way and traded as assets with this sort of like certificate of ownership to accompany them. And yeah, there's a bunch of platforms that have done this, and there's kind of subtle differences between them all and the problems they're trying to solve. I used to follow this space really closely, but I kind of don't anymore. So bear with me if what I'm saying is no longer state of the art.
No worries.
So yeah, that's one type of sort of practice or subtype of artist, I guess. But I am not really interested in putting my work in those contexts. I don't, the art that I've made so far, I mean, maybe I will in the future, who knows, but the art that I've made so far that involves blockchains is actually mostly just one project. It's called Clickmine. It's a free-to-play interactive online game, sort of like a game. I'm not sure it's fun. It's not really intended to be fun. It's maybe coming more from a bit of a satirical lens. But I guess it's it's a website, not necessarily something that is bought or has provenance. It gets exhibited from time to time. It's going to be in an exhibition in Shanghai in five days. So sometimes it sort of appears in art galleries, but it is online all the time. But it's not really like, there is a token that is part of Clickmine. So as you sort of click in this like procedurally generated like mine shaft, you are minted this token, or you're sort of given this token as though you were mining it yourself with the way you're interacting with the interface. But those tokens are not really meant to be assets, and actually kind of the opposite. They're intended to be as valueless as possible. So they're minted in just the most obscenely large quantities. It's standard ERC20 token, but you'll end up with like, I forget what the max token is. When I talked about Clickmine a lot more often, I could still say the number of the amount of tokens, that the most amount of tokens you could get with one sort of click or mine action. But I no longer remember it. It was a very large number. Yeah, Yeah, this project was in 2017. So I guess, yeah, it doesn't feel like, it feels like a different subgenre of art really. And I make other sort of artworks maybe with a bit of a similar
What is Click?
modality, these
What does
sort of interactive
Clickmine?
things.
What does Clickmine do though? Does it have like a function to it?
Well, it's a game. It's like a game.
Hmm.
It is a game, I guess. So you sort of play it or play with it, but it's not. But other than that, what is the function of an artwork?
True.
um,
True. That's no.
it's kind of like it's definitely not utilitarian.
Gotcha. Are are you working on anything else like in particular that you want to have showcased just like Clickmine?
I'm not. I mean, are you asking about art-related projects that involve
Yeah.
blockchains?
Yeah, I'm just kind of
Mm,
curious, like
uh,
if you have any other art-related projects that you're kind of working on, or fine-tuning, or that you have done.
yeah, I've done a number of other artworks that are not really blockchain related. Um,
Hmm.
Maybe one that is like a little bit peripheral to the blockchain space, at least because it still uses peer-to-peer technology. Um, is a more recent one called Remembering Network, which is sort of like a peer-to-peer memorial or archive of information about and images of extinct, endangered, or recently threatened or threatened animals. Sort of like a what if we had a memorial but a crowdsourced one. And there's sort of an invitation to participate in the memorial by adding entries to it for new animals, but also to participate in it by seeding that data, kind of like an arc or sort of vault of information that we all sort of can host together. So that uses sort of IPFS right now as its peer-to-peer layer, but I'm kind of interested in mirroring it to other peer-to-peer platforms. So I think it would be a really good fit as a DAT archive, actually. I also would sort of like to release subsets of the data, at least, as BitTorrent files as well. So that's kind of an artwork, kind of a collaborative grieving exercise, and also like a software project that is peer-to-peer, if not necessarily blockchain.
Yeah,
So
that's pretty
that's maybe
cool.
something that I think your listeners might be
There's a lot
interested
of
in.
artists in my audience. I'm sure they'll find the diversity of this very interesting too. Do you have like a website or portfolio, or do you share this stuff on social media, or like where can people like kind of see some of this stuff to get an idea?
Yeah, for sure. I'm like not great at being active on social media, but I try. I try. So I have Twitter and Instagram, and they're both under the name "Is This an Art?" Which actually, like, parallels are like, oh, there are many different arts, right? Like, so
Mm.
which art? Um, it's an old joke. And my website, which has like sort of more detailed information about Clickmine and Remembering Network and all this stuff, is this a .com.
Yeah, I'll be
Yeah.
happy to share those links for you if you'd like, in the description for the episode, and then people can kind of check it out.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And while we're at it, I'll plug Circles too,
Yeah, plug away.
which is at joincircles.net. So updates there coming about our launch. Culture Stake, Future Fairness doesn't have a website yet, but it will, of course, soon.
Does Circles have like a community where they put out information, or do they have like a Discord, or do they have like a Telegram?
We are in the process of migrating to a better chat solution. We've had Rocket Chat for forever. We recently did a community poll about what are possible users like in terms of chat platforms, and the answer we basically got was anything but Rocket Chat. So we're migrating away from it, but we haven't done that yet. In the meantime, we do have a Telegram channel, but I do not remember the link for it. All of those changes, though, will go to the website when they happen though. So
Okay, cool.
when we finished our migration, we'll make it visible.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, 'cause
Speaking
would
of
love
which,
to.
which chat platform is your favorite of
Oh,
Telegram, Discord, and Riot?
it honestly depends on what it is. I mean, I use all of them, but I think it would have to be Discord simply because it seems very easy for me to navigate. And there's a lot of communities that have a Discord channel, and I can very easily get a hold of someone through Discord. And the
Mhm.
notifications are pretty good and consistent. Um, I have a lot of issues with Telegram, and it's really hard to invite people to Telegram because I operate on my computer a lot, and people have Telegram on their phone. So they'll get, if I send them a link to join a community or I get a link, I can't really do it from my computer. Or at least I have a hard time. I don't know. Maybe I'm just not smart enough to figure out Telegram. But Telegram's
Mm.
really cool once you're in it, but there's they need to work on the like whole invite phase. I have some issues with that. Discord works really well. I love Discord. Slack is great, like for like inter community, inter company type work. So maybe not so great for community stuff, but Slack is pretty cool too. But in terms of community
Mhm.
stuff, I love using Discord. Um, I'm not quite sure what else is out there for maybe Reddit. I think
Yeah.
Discord might be the best, honestly, in my opinion, but everyone has their preference.
Consider your vote recorded.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, there's a number of them, and it's, they all have sort of different trade-offs. Chat platforms.
Mhm.
Who knew? One of the great unsolved problems of technology.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they're getting very, very popular for all kinds of things. So there's no right or wrong way to do it, but I think we all have our preference. I definitely prefer Discord. It's just super easy for everything. Yeah, anyways, I think that's a good place to kind of wrap it up. I think we went for quite a while. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, Sarah, thank you for, taking the time to share everything from your experience and what you're doing with these different projects and with circles and your background. I think it'll be very interesting for a lot of people, and they'll take a lot out of it. And hope to have you again on in the near future. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I hope the rambling about art stuff is comes out intelligible, on a second listen. And yeah, it was a pleasure. So have a good afternoon. I think it is where you are.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's now noon my time. What time is it in Germany? You guys are like 7 hours ahead or something, right?
Yeah, it's coming up 7 o'clock.
Yeah, okay, right on the dot. I have at least one friend in Germany, so I'm pretty sure you guys are about 7 hours ahead. So 7 o'clock. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Well, yeah, have a great evening. Really appreciate it. Talk to you again soon.